Okay, so tomorrow we're going to talk about x and y intercepts, and we're going to integrate those with linear equations. So if we look at our first graph here, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. Therefore, because this is the x-axis, this point is the x-intercept. Okay, when you do the coordinate for that, the x is 1, 2, it's over 2, and it's up and down 0. So notice when you're doing the coordinate for the x-intercept, the y coordinate has to be 0, okay? And in order for anything to cross on this x-axis, it can't be up or down, it has to be right on this. So at all times, you know the point is the y-intercept if you know 0, or x-intercept if you know 0 is right here. Up here we have the y-intercept, because again, it's crossing the y-axis, and it crosses it at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the coordinate here would be x is 0 and y is 6. So when we're talking about the x-intercept, or excuse me, the y-intercept, the x value has to be 0. When you're talking about the x-intercept, the y value makes 0. And you have to make that sense, because if it's on the x-axis, or excuse me, on the y-axis, oh, I need more coffee. If it's on the y-axis, there has to be some number here to tell you where to plot it. If it's on the x-axis, there has to be some number in the x position to tell you where to plot it. Now, if we wanted to finish this out and do the equation, we would need to find the slope. So I'm going to start at this point, and there's another point here. So I would say this slope goes down 1, 2, 3, and over 1. So the slope is -3 over 1, or just -3. And so if we want to write the equation in y equals mx plus b, we have y equals -3 is your slope, plug in our x, and b is the y-intercept, so that is 6. Okay. But in your classwork tomorrow, you're going to be able to identify x and y intercepts. So let's look over here. This is the x-axis. It intercepts the x-axis at, that's -1, 2, 3, 4, -5. So if I'm going to write my equation, it's -5, and y has to be 0. That's the x-intercept. If I look at the y-intercept here, x has to be 0, y has to be a number, and it's 2. Okay, so this, because there's a number in the y, this is the y-intercept. Because there's a number in the x, this is the x-intercept. And again, if we want to carry this over into finding the equation of the line, we can go point to point. Here's a point, and here's a point. Or we could actually go up to these points and simplify it. So if I did this, my line rises 2 and runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So m is 2 over 5, right? Up 2 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, if I want to write the equation of the line, it's y equals m x plus b is the y-intercept, which is 2. Okay, in your work tomorrow, you're going to be given an equation, and you have to find the x and y-intercepts. So as we set up here, when you find the x-intercept, there has to be a number here, and y has to be 0. So to figure out what the x-intercept of this line is, I'm going to replace y with 0. So this is going to become 2x plus 3, and I'm going to replace y with 0, because I'm trying to figure out what this x-intercept is, equals 3. So 3 minus 0 is 0. 2x plus 0 is just 2x. So if we have 2x equals 3, and I divide by 2, x is 3/2. So this x-intercept is at 3/2, which is 1.5. So that's where it intercepts on the x-axis. Now if I want to turn around and figure out where it intercepts on the y-axis, so if it intercepts on the y-axis, x has to be 0, and y has to be some number that's going to be on there. So I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to replace x with 0, because I'm trying to figure out what the y is. Okay, so 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 3y just gives you 3y. Oops, I messed up. This is supposed to be 3, not 0, right? Catching my mistakes now, it's better, right? All right, and then we divide by 3. And so my y-intercept is 3 over 3, which is 1. Okay, so this line, if we were to graph it, has a y-intercept at 3/2, which is 1.5, and it has our x-intercept, excuse me, and a y-intercept of 1, and then you can just draw your line from there, right? But that's where it intercepts there. Okay, and then you can do the same thing when it's in slope-intercept form. If I want to find what the x-intercept is, remember the x-intercept has to have some number x, and y must be 0. And the y-intercept has to be 0 in the x position and some number in the y position. So again, if I want to find the x-intercept, y has to be 0. So we just plug in 0 here, and that's x minus 6, and then you have to add 6 to both sides to get x by itself. So that is x equals 6. So the x-intercept is at 6, 0. So it's at 6 on the x-axis. And then we do the same thing for the y. If I want to know what the y-intercept is, I have to plug 0 in for x. So we have y equals 0 minus 6. And what is 0 minus 6? It's negative 6. So my y-intercept is at the negative 6 on the y-axis. Okay, and so that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. They're going to be asking you to find the x and y intercepts of different word problems. So what I really need you to understand is, if we're taking notes, this would be a really good thing to write down. Hint, hint. The x-intercept, the y value must be 0. For the y-intercept, the x value must be 0. So when we have an equation, when we're trying to find this, I'm going to plug 0 in for my y. When I'm trying to find y, I plug 0 in for x. All right, now for your homework tonight, we're going to go back to the skills book, and you're going to start the problem set, so you do not need to complete 1 and 2 in vocabulary. So the first part's very easy. This one says a farmer is selling apples and oranges. So you have to say A is apples and B is for oranges. And you just have to come up with the equation. It's 75 cents per apple plus 89 cents for oranges. They didn't use O here because O looks like A is 0, so they used B, but you could use something else. So those are the first ones. You're going to do the evens. Then here, you're going to do it one step further. They tell you how much the flowers are in lilies, and then they want to reach a certain dollar amount. So this time, you have to have it equals to the dollar amount, and that you stop right there. So identify each variable and set up the equation, and you're done. And again, you're going to do the evens on that. And then here, you're going to use this question for all the rest of the problems. And they actually set up the equation for you. It's $2.50 for hamburgers and $1.50 for hot dogs. And we want to reach $900. Okay? And in this case, they said, well, what if we sell 315? So you plug in 315, and then therefore you have to sell 75 hot dogs. And this one needs a sentence. And so again, you're going to do the evens on this. So you're going to use, on this one, it says 420 hot dogs, how many hamburgers? So you're going to go back up to this equation and plug in 420 for your hot dogs H and solve it and put a sentence. Okay? Have a good night.